And so, Game Week 10 was the game week where £15 million could no longer be justified, with 180,000 managers abandoning Erling Haaland and celebrating his fourth blank in 5 game weeks, and with over 320,000 swooping for mighty Mo Salah and being rewarded with a captaincy score of 18 points. With a tough run of fixtures beckoning for the faded North's force, the time feels right to move those funds around, especially with the hapless Haaland's own defensive teammate having treble the amount of goals in the last 5 game weeks. Elsewhere, Game Week 10 proved to be the game week of the underdog, with the team of the week featuring Southampton's goalkeeper, 4.5 million defenders, 4 midfielders priced at 5.5 million or less, and 2 much maligned attackers whose ownership is sure to rise with some tantalising fixtures next time out. In a game where so many converge to a core group of players, the Dream Team's most selected member was owned by only 12% of managers, showcasing that the differential delights are there for those with the daring to diverge from the norm. And that's what I did in Game Week 10, becoming one of 162,000 managers to deploy the wildcard and reaping some immediate benefits. In the last video, I showcased the 3 wildcard drafts I was looking at: the 1 premium defender draft, the 2 premium defender draft, and the 0 premium defender midfield maestro draft. In the end, I opted against owning any defensive heavyweights. Yet despite it being a game week where the budget backline thrived, none of those big scorers were selected in my team. And when Gvardiol smashed home his 3rd goal in 5 game weeks, I could hear the cacawing of the crows ready to ravage the festering corpse of my fantasy chances. And then came what could be the most pivotal kick of the season, as my substitute goalkeeper stared down my big balls call of a selection as he ready to take a penalty kick. Having saved one from the same player last season, my heart was in me mouth, but the big players delivering the big moments, and Bruno Fernandes buried that penalty to give me a solid 10 points. Sadly though, that was as good as it got for me, with my final wildcard draft ultimately disappointing in their first showing in the fabled black and purple stripes. Indeed, Mighty Mo and Feisty Fernandes were the only 2 players to get any sort of return for my team, except of course for Lewis Hall and Jørgen Strand Larsen, whose 8 points both rotted away on me bench. Nevertheless, it was a game week that inspired great positivity in my mind. Not only did all the wildcard drafts I'd considered outscore the non-wildcard team I would have had, but also some valuable lessons have been learned. Perhaps Game Week 10's most important reminder was that of home advantage, with all 4 players in my squad who secured returns playing in the home stadium. It's a factor I'd failed to consider when starting Mikalenko and Visser over Strand Larsen and Hall, and while those calls had merit in their own right, the outcomes were a wake-up call for something that is often forgotten in fantasy selections. It's something I simply must bear in mind in the coming game weeks, especially when my team has 15 viable starters. Of course, having 8 players playing away from home in Game Week 10 means I have home advantage in Game Week 11, with 9 of my starters playing in the home stadium, a number that would increase to 10 were I to bench Saka for Nico Jackson. I can't see me opting for that approach come deadline day, but it is far from the only tough decision to make next week. Aït-Nouri and Dalot both start, given they are both at home with favourable fixtures, but that 3rd defender is much tougher to call. Mikalenko is the weakest option, but he has the most favourable fixture in West Ham. Meanwhile, Rico Lewis is away to Brighton and Lewis Hall is away to Forest, both teams featuring an informed striker on their own patch. I currently have Rico Lewis in my starting 11, but he is the biggest minutes risk of the 3, and there's every chance my Newcastle bias takes over as that deadline approaches. By far the biggest call in Game Week 11 is that of captaincy. Despite his poor form, Erling Haaland remains the best captaincy option in Game Week 11, especially with De Bruyne back on the grass and Brighton's proclivity for defending in a manner most likely to yield chances to the Norse force. course. However, having become one of the 31% of managers not to own him, and with the other outstanding option of Dirty Dom Solanke also unavailable to me, I have to look elsewhere for my captaincy. And in my squad, I see 4 viable options: Mighty Mo, Flying Brian, JSL, and the feistiest of punts himself, Bruno Fernandes. Each of those players makes a strong case. Mighty Mo Salah is the obvious choice, with returns in 4 out of 5 home fixtures, including 3 goals and 2 assists, and 2 double-figure scores at Anfield, in addition to a further 4 huge hauls on the road. He is Mr. Consistency, yet in Aston Villa, he has the toughest opposition of all 4 options. However, this is not necessarily a detriment for the FPL Goat, as he has 39 points in 3 matches against the Big 6 teams this season, and 2 of those huge hauls are on the road, so imagine what he's going to do at Anfield. With that being said, Jørgen Strand Larsen also has returns in 4 from 5 home games, including goals against Manchester City and Chelsea, and an assist against Newcastle. He has 3 goals and 5 bonus points in his last 4 games, and he has the tastiest fixture of all, that plum tie at home to Southampton. Furthermore, with Wolves' defensive woes this season, they are least likely to be able to sit back and clinch a victory, meaning they will be forced to continue to attack throughout the match. Strand Larsen also offers genuine differential potential, with only 2.3% of managers owning him, and even fewer of those willing to captain him. With that being said, strikers have a lower point ceiling than midfielders, and that low ownership is an argument not to give him the armband, as his points will be differential impact enough in themselves. However, if we are looking for a home banker, we need look no further than Flying Brian Mbeumo. He has returned in every single home game this season with a stunning 7 goals in 5 matches, which gives him 55 points at the G-Tech, or if you prefer, an average of 11 points a game. Furthermore, opponents Bournemouth have only 1 clean sheet all season and have yet to win on the road, music to the ears of a team that has 9 goals in the last 2 matches on home turf. If we look only at the facts and the stats, then Flying Brian Mbeumo is the obvious captaincy choice in Gameweek 11, perhaps even if you have Haaland in your squad. And yet, there's a small part of me that wants to plump for the feisty option of Bruno Fernandes. His record this season does not compare to the other options. His team looked turgid for the majority of the game against Chelsea on Sunday, and yet Bruno Fernandes scored his 3rd goal in 2 games since Erik ten Hag was given the boot. He had other chances to add to that goal. Furthermore, just last week he scored twice in a 5-2 win against Leicester, his opposition in Gameweek 11. What's more, he has that fabled new manager bounce, which often imbues talismanic players with supernatural powers in the short term. And of course, Bruno Fernandes was my top scoring player in Gameweek 10. I imagine that when the deadline draws near and that differential dread starts to rise, my thoughts will narrow to Salah or Mbeumo. After all, the scores of JSL and Fernandes will be differential enough without the armband. And ultimately my captaincy choice will come down to COJONES, because while Mighty Mo is a safe pick, Brian Mbeumo is objectively the best choice for Gameweek 11. If I do entrust the armband to anyone other than Mighty Mo, I simply must get the decision correct, because that 4.72 points a game week average I need to make up on the world number 1 has extended to 5.5 points a game week. A change so significant, it suggests my priority should be on regaining top spot in the League of Gentlemen before turning my attentions back to wider glory. Down in the dregs of the division, it was another game week where things stayed pretty much the same, with one significant exception. At long last, after so many game weeks of pain, the villainous Grinchy Vogt managed to secure a significant green arrow, rising 2 places in the table and nearly 1 million places in the overall rankings after securing the 2nd highest score of the game week. His 3 transfer gambit to bring in Salah, Aït-Nouri and Cunha paid off instantly, and even though the outgoing Semenyo scored 10 points, his replacement was Mighty 20 more, whose captain's armband give him 18. Further returns from Rodgers and Johnson elevated Sneaky Simon's score further. But even in success, the pain continued for the League of Gentlemen's cautionary tale. First, he saw the bench-towered Bellis outscore all his other defenders. Then, in a game week of tough benching calls, he saw the attacker he left out score a sensational 16 points. And rubbing further salt in the wound was seeing his goalkeeper lose 8 points in stoppage time. Had he secured those additional points, then the Devils' favourite DJ would have risen all the way to 24th. Yet finally arresting his fall and swinging the momentum means it was a good game week for the Grinch, and all those ahead of him will now be warily looking over the shoulders. The Grinch wasn't the only gentleman to suffer the sting of Solanke, with Jockin Jeeves selling him for Nico Jackson, a decision that cost him an immediate 15 points and now leaves him with a striker facing Arsenal in game week 11 rather than one up against Ipswich Town. And the worst thing is, Solanke's 16 wasn't the only huge haul to elude the rap Rob Roy, with Ola Reiner's 15 points on the bench, outscoring 8 of his starting 11 single-handedly. Those 29 lost points would have seen the Townhead gunner up to 9th place, but instead he remains firmly ensconced in mid-table, and he's left clinging to the hope he can make it to the game week 12 fixture swing without too much more damage being done. Jockin Jeeves was one of a host of fallers in the chasing pack, as once again last week's green arrows were replaced with some reds. Iceman Newton has fallen from title contention to mediocrity in alarming fashion, as a real-world relocation to Yorkshire occupies his time. Much like Maverick Mikey though, he could benefit from those rolling transfer rule changes if he re-engages in the coming game weeks. Former champion Dan the Dragon's struggles continued with another 2 returns left on his bench, but with every chip left in his locker, you have to expect his fortunes to change in the game weeks to come. Meanwhile, Red Hot Rob, Mighty Mouse, Private Parvesh and Ginger Ben were all leapfrogged by uncaged Andy Page, who is hot on the tail of both Hilo Hodgson and John Go-Karting, who both dropped places in the rankings. And what that means is that all 5 places behind top spot are occupied by gentlemen who climbed the ladder this game week. The first of which is King Ding, whose 54 points saw him climb up to 6th place. However, the King should be sat in 3rd place right now, as he was all set to start Lewis Hall this game week until I told him that I suspected Hall would be benched as a result of Eddie Howe's comments about players playing 3 times in 6 days. And that's on me. That's my fault, and I can only hope the King takes some consolation from Hall also being left on my bench alongside Jorgen Strand Larsen, who the King saw fit to start. No doubt the King enjoyed my blunder of benching the wonderful Strand Larsen, one that many would call karmic justice. Additionally, the sensei of squad selection also benefited again from Harwood Bellis, while Rodgers and Captain Salah were his big score heroes. However, what is perhaps the most pertinent is that the King is the highest scoring gentleman still to have every single chip in his locker. And those who remember his huge comeback victory 5 seasons ago will recall that it began after the November international break. So, while the uninitiated may suspect the King is out of the running, those of us in the know will never disregard the 4-time champ with the huge chip advantage. Ahead of the King in 5th place is the inspirational story for all FPL managers, as defending champ Dan Gestoso-Cabezas served up an ace of a game week, forearm smashing home 80 points to take centre court and rise 1.8 million places in the overall rankings. And more importantly, he rose 12 places in the League of Gentlemen table. Vardiol, Johnson, Semenyo, Cunha, Solanke and Captain Salah all added to his baseline score, creating a situation so many FPL managers will simply love to see, forcing his rivals to break point and proving the defending champ is far from Wimbledon. It was the Grand Slam game week Gestoso-Cabezas needed, proving it is far too early to call game, set and match on his title reign. Ahead of the defending champ are the 4 gens to break the 600 point threshold, with myself on 602 points, Wildman Whitfield on 603 and Brad the Lad on 609. And I could sit here bemoaning my benching of Strand Larson, but the reality is Brad the Lad had Semenyo on his bench, so the situation could have been an awful lot worse. However, all 3 of us have our sights firmly set on Gladiator Glenn, and it's a target that moved further away in game week 10 after he outscored us all by a handful of points. For the 3rd game week in 4, the Gladiator left Welbeck's return on the bench, and you have to wonder what more the Brighton Brigadier has to do to make it into the starting 11. And it's a situation that could extend into a further game week 2, with Brighton set to play Man City this weekend, though given the form Man City are in at the minute, and that Welbeck came through the Manchester United Academy, you have to wonder if benching him again will prove another massive mistake. Given Welbeck is one of my top targets to replace Wisser in game week 13, time is running out for the Gladiator to reap the rewards of his ownership. And he really needs to, because only a stoppage time goal from Maddison and a surprising clean sheet from Ramsdale prevented yet another game week of decline. Still, it was another successful captaincy call from the Gladiator, making it 2 from 2 after a spectacular run of points dodging in that regard. And though it was far from a vintage game week, the Gladiator did grind out the points to extend his advantage just a little bit, and that means the rest of us have 1 game week fewer to close the ground. It may be seen as a fortuitous game week for the Gladiator, but getting points when playing badly is the mark of a champion, and it's up to the rest of us in the chasing pack to catch him. And catch the Gladiator is exactly what I'm going to do, as the Gladiator's squad starts to look threadbare and the fixtures begin to turn. My wildcard will be the driving force that pushes my lords to chase him down. We're already 5 points better off than we would have been without gambling on going early on the wildcard. And now the Gladiator will look at my team for next week and he'll know that, on paper at least, the walls are starting to close in. Mighty Morton does not have the transfers to get anywhere near the depth and power my squad possesses, and every reactionary move that Mighty Morton makes, I will be making the proactive one that increases the pressure. They're going to have to call me Andy Anaconda, because I've sized up my prey, and now my grip on this title race will tighten like a vice before I devour the Gladiator whole and slither away with my 2nd League of Gentlemen title in the entire history of the world's greatest mini-league. Only King Ding and Jockin Jeeves have multiple title reigns, and this is the year I add my name to that short yet illustrious list. And as we enter the final game week of my 30s, my lords are simply destined to give me the gift of a score that well and truly sets me on the road to glory. I look at my team and I think 80 points is a conservative estimate, and maybe you'll all come back next week and laugh at me, but maybe, just maybe, game week 11 is when the season truly turns in my favour. And so, ahead of a game week that will surely only end in my biggest score of the season, let me just say, may all your transfers be successes, may all your arrows be green, and may those FPL gods be in your favour. Inject yourself with a venom of victory by hitting that subscribe button, and we will see you next time. I could hear the cacaw of the crow, the cacaw, 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 cacaw. I could hear the cacaw of the crows ready to...
It's an FPL Nightmare, company pulling out more, yeah. I'm the greatest football manager to ever grace the old armchair, but the FPL gods hate me, and no one seems to care that my points are only average, and my ranking is not fair.